Good afternoon and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Arts and Culture Commission. It is Thursday, March 21st. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioners Derhovanesian?
Yes.
Gregorian?
I'm here.
Kivanian?
Present.
Chairperson Deaver?
Here.
For the record, Commissioner Lee is absent. The agenda for the March 21st meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall on March 15th, 2013.
Next item.
Item 2, consent items. At 2A, approval of special meeting minutes from February 14th, 2013.
Were there any comments, questions on the minutes?
That was fine.
Move to approve.
I'll second that.
Roll call.
Commissioners Derhovanesian?
Yes.
Gregorian?
Yes.
Kivanian?
Yes.
Chairperson Deaver?
Yes.
At 2B, approval of regular meeting minutes from February 21st, 2013.
Questions or comments?
I will move the minutes.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioners Derhovanesian?
Yes.
Gregorian?
Yes.
Kivanian?
Yes.
Chairperson Deaver?
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 3, introductions and presentations. At 3A, Library Arts and Culture events presented by Chuck Wyke, Community Relations Manager.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Deaver, Commissioners, and City staff. I'm here today to give you a brief rundown of what's coming up in the next month, but I may go over my time limit. I don't know how to make this any shorter. I can try talking fast, but you do have a lot of notes and some of the flyers for the music and art programs. First of all, I wanted to just let you know that our One Book, One Glendale program came off without a hitch. We had two fabulous authors, Hector Tobar, who spoke about his book, The Barbarian Nurseries, and on the right in this picture, Gustavo Arellano. They put on a show. They put on a lively show, and people left energized. It was a real good program. We had a lot of participation from Glendale College students also. There were a couple of classes there. Upcoming, the Associates of Brand Library have a film series. Their next program is on Wednesday, April 3rd at the Central Library. They're going to show a documentary about the history of experimental film, and there's a representative from LA Film Forum, thank you, who's going to come and speak and answer questions about this documentary. It's, the 60s, the 70s. It'll be a lot of fun. At the Central Library, you do have a page on this separate. We have a community meeting for the planning for the Central Library renovation. We have the architects. They will discuss their plan, and we want the community to come down and give us their thoughts, see what we're thinking about, and let us know what they think. And of course, if you visit the Central Library, you do get 3 hours free parking across the street if you validate with us at the loan desk. A month or so ago, we had the Armunity organization. It's an offshoot of the D.D. Hirsch Mental Health Services. This time they're coming back with a group of therapists who are going to talk about the after effects of genocide, particularly the Armenian genocide, not just at the time, but also intergenerational, what goes through people's heads now. I think that's going to be a real good program. That's on Thursday, April 11th, 7 p.m., Central Library. Our friends at the library hold a book sale every second Saturday. The next one's on the 13th of Saturday. They pulled in over $800 last month, so we're doing something right with the publicity, or they've got great books there. Go find out. It's in the back of the building. Also that day, later on, there's our monthly opera talks. This one is going to be behind the scenes at the opera. So I suspect they'll talk about the sets or maybe the music, the musicians, how they put these things together. They're always fun, the behind the scenes talks. National Library Week is coming up. It's the week of April 14 through 20. That's Sunday through Saturday. And we are fortunate this year to be able to book a number of authors, a number of events, and some week-long events. On the 15th, Wendy Lawless is going to come and talk about her memoir, The Chanel Bonfire. It's being billed as kind of a mommy dearest. She grew up in an abusive household. She and her sister pulled themselves out, and she's successful today. She actually lives in Glendale. This book has been widely reviewed. I saw reviews in O Magazine, the Oprah Magazine, in People. She had an excerpt in Reader's Digest. It's a big deal, and we're lucky to have her. She approached us and said, would you like a couple of copies of my new book? We're able to slot her in here. The next day, Independent Voices 2. So last year we did the first one. This is the second one. It's a group of self-published authors. The man up on top is Dean Hartwell. Let me see, make sure I get the names right. Aline Ashishian is on the lower left. She's a Clark Magnet School high school senior, and she's written a novel. Dean has written a number of books. The third woman on the top right is Marilyn Legrone Amaral, and her book is kind of a combination of prose and poetry and paintings. They're all very personal books. They tell their stories. I think what the community responded to last year was that we have them talk about the business of self-publishing. What does it take to do this? What are the options people have? I remember last year all of the authors were somewhat critical of the types of artwork that goes into the covers of these books. It doesn't look like Simon & Schuster or Doubleday or whatever. I think they're looking better. So that's certainly going to be a good program. That's Tuesday. On Wednesday, again at 7 o'clock, Central Library Auditorium, we have a group of artists from the Shushi Art Project. It's a Los Angeles-based nonprofit organization whose purpose is to present artistic events that celebrate diversity. And they're going to come and talk about some of the work they've done. One of the founders is Harry Vorparian. He taught at Shamlian. He had an art gallery at Holly Street Art Gallery in Old Town Pasadena. He's local. He's really good. That should be good. And then we're finishing up on Thursday with a fine author, Amy Willens. She's going to talk about her second book on Haiti. She's spent about 25 years looking at the country and the people and the issues and the positives in Haiti. This one she calls Farewell Fred Voodoo. Her background, besides her other books, I'm reading one. It's when she moved to Los Angeles from New Jersey. It's called I Feel Earthquakes More Often Than They Happen. That she wrote when Arnold Schwarzenegger was still the governor. That's a fun read, but she writes for the New Yorker and the Nation, and right now she's teaching in the literary journalism program at UC Irvine. So we've got her finishing up Thursday. On Saturday we have two events. Armin Anassian and Mark Robson, two fine instrumentalists, will perform, among other things, the Richard Strauss Piano Sonata. Violin Sonata. That's Saturday, April 20th. Thank you. In our auditorium at 2 p.m. It's always good to have Mark, and again, this program in particular would have been up at Brand Library, but they're closed for the renovation. So we are fortunate to have not only them but the Steinway from Brand Library. So it's going to be fun. Also later that day, we're going to turn our library connection at Adams Square, one of our smaller branch locations, into a coffee house where the Clark Magnet High School Music Club will come and perform. Alfred Molina is the guitarist there. He's sort of a folk singer. That's Saturday, April 20th, 4 p.m. All week, that entire week, two of our sites, the Montrose Branch and the Central Library Children's Room, will have Where's Waldo scavenger hunts. So you'll wander around either one of those two children's rooms and try and find Waldo or his friends. And then if you can keep a secret, we don't like to let this out too soon, but we're having Fine Free Week again during National Library Week. We just want to get our stuff back. So we like the fines that goes into the coffers, but we'd like to get our books back also, or our CDs or our DVDs. So tell your friends, if you know anybody who's remiss in returning items. I wanted to let you know that the Friends of the Library will hold their annual meeting on Wednesday, May 15. And that actually starts at 6:30. But following that business meeting, where they will introduce their new board members, we are having attorneys Mark Garagos and Pat Harris. They're going to talk about their new book, Mistrial. Mark, I don't know where to start. He's highly involved in Armenian affairs. He's been part of the litigation that's tried to go after Turkey in class action suits. At the same time, he represents Chris Brown in the Rihanna and Chris Brown trial.
Michael Jackson.
And
many other celebrities.
Celebrities. I guess that's what you'd have to call it. Pat Harris is one of his partners. Pat sued the Catholic Church for molestation, and he was the one molested. Very interesting people. There may be some, well, I don't know. You love them or you hate them and what they do. Come and find out what they're about. I think it'll be a good program. We'll draw a lot of people to that. That'll be fun. Finally, of course, we have our website and our Facebook page. You can get more information there.
Question. Last Sunday, how did the 3D storytelling turn out?
I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody about that. I can send you a note, though. I'll let you know what the...
Because I was intrigued about it, and it's a phenomenal
sure.
style. Just wanted to see what happened. Did many people participate or not?
Any questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. White. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Item 4, oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not on this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The commission may refer the matter to city staff for investigation and report.
And we have 2 cards, so I'd like to invite up Joy Fuhr first, please. Did I pronounce that right?
Foyer.
Foyer, thank
That's
you.
okay.
I felt like I had it wrong.
It's the 3 vowels together, you know. Hello, everybody. My name is Joy Foyer, now that we've got that out there. I'm a longtime Glendale resident and the founder of an arts organization called Art from the Ashes. A few of you may be aware of what we've done, both locally here in Glendale and all over the U.S. And first of all, I'm just thrilled, like so many of my creative comrades here, about seeing such a comprehensive plan for the city that we call home, and the idea that we can really develop and layer creative community and a lot of experiences for the general public to really sort of get in tune with art and find their inner artist if need be. And we have a bunch of things we've all been talking about, but I am curious about the GATE program. I saw that it's once again in the plan, and I was curious if there is an RFP going out for this contract, and if there is, Art from the Ashes would be interested in submitting a proper proposal. And we have, beyond our cause-based work that we do, we have a team of designers, engineers, fabricators, artists, and a pretty extensive background in publicity, marketing, and programming. So we would love the opportunity to, take it to the next level and really integrate a lot of the community. So,
Comments?
It sounds great, and as soon as we find out how things work out, we'll let you know.
Great. Yeah, I'm glad that you came forward with that. It's good for us to know because we're working through that process in the coming months for sure, and certainly I've been to your events before and appreciate what you do in the community here and elsewhere as well.
perfect. Thank you so much, and I'll wait to hear from you.
If I may add to my colleagues, it's not only the GATE program, but we expect you to participate in all our other programs.
Oh, that's a given. We don't stop in one space, but that was a specific area that what we do, I think, we could really impact the community. So
We need partners in Open Studio Tour, in all kinds of
Oh,
other programs that we do, and we really appreciate your participation, active participation.
you got it.
Especially in the future, we are going to have other locations that are going to be ongoing for, facilitated for that special purpose. So hopefully we could serve you, if not through GATE, it would be through our other centers.
Yeah, that's excellent news, because we've typically gone around and you find spaces to have art shows and exhibitions. But what I found too, and again, we've been speaking as a group here, what would be nice is if it's consistent so that the Glendale community gets in the habit of knowing, okay, and May there's an art tour, and in this month there's that. And so it's not the exception, it's the art rule that is continually thriving and happening in the city. So anyway, this is really great conversations, and thanks for all your effort.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next card for Kim Koga, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Kim Koga. I'm the Director of the Museum of Neon Art. I'm really here to talk about a fundraising tour that we have coming up on April 27th. It's a Saturday, and thanks for posting the image. We're going to be starting at the Americana in the Great Room and having a nice reception there that's going to be catered by DeLuca's Deli. Normally our tours run about $55 a person. This one is $100. So the $55 covers the tour and the catering, and then the $50 you'll get a membership for two, as well as it'll be a nice donation to our efforts to Glow to Glendale. And I don't have any updated information about the project right now, so next time I do, I'll let you know.
And what is the website where people can go and purchase tickets and get more information? Or
Okay, our website is www.neonmona.org, and tickets will also be on sale at the Glendale Arts website probably by next week.
Thank you so much for coming, and and good luck with the fundraiser. Certainly, it's an exciting time. I know we're driving forward this year with the project. So, thanks. Next item, please.
Item 5, business agenda. At 5A, action items. At 1, approve 2013-2015 Arts and Culture Commission work plan.
Well, as we're getting the PowerPoint set up, this is something we've been working on since October. I think when we first began this process, we thought, arts and cultural plan and a work plan were many, many months away, but we're finally here. And so today we're going to be discussing the 2-year work plan, trying to establish the budget and identify and confirm those programs, approve it today so that we can begin implementation with the new fiscal year in July. So just to remind you, in February, the Arts and Cultural Plan was approved unanimously by the Council. And then 2 days later, we started discussing the work plan, and you identified priority policies and programs. At that meeting, the Commission actually decided that you wanted to go ahead with a 2-year work plan. Since we were putting so much effort into this, we really wanted to make that investment and expand it to a 2-year plan. So today, it's to ultimately approve that 2-year budget along with the plan, and then in the next coming months, we're really going to identify the scope of some of these policies and these programs so we can begin implementing. And so to reiterate, some of the priority policies that you want to focus on, first and foremost, is developing a streamlined and centralized process to issue grants through the Urban Art Fund. This would actually, set the foundation so you can begin issuing those grants to artists and community organizations, and we can begin that process as early as next month so that it's completed by the beginning of the next fiscal year. Another policy is reviewing existing codes, regulations, and requirements in relation to arts so we can find out what is the current policy and if we need to make any of those adjustments. The third is developing or discussing developing a % for art requirement for CIP projects. Right now, we have a private, we have a requirement, or it's a development standard for private development. The dates listed below each of these are, the timeline of when we can accomplish this. In your packets, I gave you a 2-year schedule, so you know how busy you're going to be for the next 2 years. So this is just a reminder of how we can space things out so we can make sure that we're focusing. Priority programs and projects that were identified using the general fund. If you recall, we have to look at the Urban Art Fund and the general fund separately, since the Urban Art Fund can't cover something such as like general administration, M&O, or insurance premiums. But the good news is the website and the electronic newsletter, although last month when we were discussing we thought that it was going to cost a lot of money, we could actually tie in our website redesign with the city's website redesign process at no cost to us, which is really great. It'll push out the completion date just a couple of more months, but it'll save us money. Along with the electronic newsletter, we can just subscribe under the existing Library, Arts, and Culture department. We would have our own email newsletter, but the department pays for enough subscriptions that we could do that. The third and fourth are essentially what we're going to be spending a bulk of our money on, which is the insurance and some of the implementation costs for the temporary art displays and parks facilities, as well as general administration, which is ongoing. And so just to show you how we see those funds being distributed over the 2 years, we would be spending at most $5,000 a year for the temporary art display in parks. We've identified 2 different insurance options. So I'm just going to be working with the risk management office to find out what's going to make the most sense and what's going to be the most cost effective for us to use. And if we were to carry over 2 fiscal years, if that ends up saving money for us. And then our general administration is pretty much a set cost. We know how much that is. And then we're just giving ourselves a little bit of a discretionary fund just in case. Next to the Urban Art Fund, of course, we have more funding there, so the list is much longer. You identified a series of projects and programs that you wanted to continue. We have the temporary art projects. Again, we've just looked at the big picture. We haven't identified specific programs. You've just said, these are areas we want to focus on, and this is how much we think we want to spend. Open Studio Tour, Performing Arts Program, grants, cultural programming, murals, the GATE program, which was something that the council requested that the commission consider continuing, temporary or permanent art on city property, the Michael Kalish sculpture, which you approved and the council approved to install at Fire Station 21, should be installed this May. And finally, capital improvement to city facilities for the purposes of art. So this is the budget that we had initially identified. Comes out to about $211,000 a year. And ultimately, the decision that we need to make, or the commission needs to make, is how much do you want to allocate using the Urban Art Fund? When we had discussed during the our retreat and other conversations, you wanted to commit to an average of $150,000, but you can choose to increase that or reduce it if you want to, for the first 2 years, spend a little bit more. I mean, it's ultimately your decision. And then also, how much do you want to spend on each of the programs or projects that are funded through the Urban Art Fund? I showed you what you had allocated. We can discuss that again. And unfortunately, this slide doesn't look as pretty on this PowerPoint, but I can tell you what each of those little bubbles or those call-outs says. Basically, for the performing arts programs and cultural programming, I can't even read it from here. Let me look at
I think you wanted to combine. The
that's what I thought it said, is do we want to combine into one program area? So do we just want to say we want to have cultural and or performing arts programs, maybe reduce that amount by just a little bit, but then in the long term, rather than issuing, $5,000 or $10,000 grants, we issue micro grants. That's a possibility. The other one is discretionary funding. That needs to be increased. I think 15,000 over 2 years is not enough. I think we should at least have a 10%. But again, that's not money that we're necessarily going to be spending. It's just to have, just in case something comes up. If an artist comes to the commission and says, I want to donate this piece and it needs to be installed, that can cost upwards of $20,000 or $30,000. So we should plan for that. The temporary permanent art on city property, again, is do you want to, allocate that much money? Same with the GATE program. Council asked that you discuss continuing it, but think about how much you wanted to allocate for that and for how long. And at this point, this concludes my presentation, and I can answer any questions that you may have.
Actually, before I open the floor, Dick Heimbold, I wanted to call to the podium. You had some comments on this item.
Good afternoon. Chairperson Deaver and Commissioners, thanks for having me here today. A big thanks for the Diamond Award that we are up for. We're going to have an award presentation at the end of April with all our spouses and friends. I hope you have enough room for us. That's really huge for us. Thanks again. And I want to also express our thanks for the plan that's just been discussed by Annette, including capital improvements for the Civic Auditorium, where we can have large art shows. As you know, I've been here before, and that's a big problem with us. We were having a lot of success with bigger shows, and we ran out of venues for them. So a big thanks on that. I've got a couple of comments. The plan, I think, is terrific in its comprehensiveness and the way that costs have been laid out and everything like that. It shows a lot of smart thinking. One area, though, I would appreciate it if you'd take another look at it. The infrastructure improvements are scheduled to start in September, which makes it tough for us to do anything in this year. If that could be pulled up or accelerated in some way, we would like to have some kind of large art exhibit in the beginning of November in the Civic Auditorium. So I would appreciate your reconsideration of that. One other thought I had in talking with my colleagues in the art world, we sort of feel as if the Art and Cultural Commission would benefit with the help of a art group, like an advisory group, which was representative of organizations like mine and perhaps Mona and Art from the Ashes and BMAI and whatever. And I've talked to people in most of these places, and they're very receptive. They're kind of eager to make a contribution and communicate with the people in the community who do the planning for these art initiatives. And I think it would redound to the advantage of the Art and Cultural Commission if there were people who had specialized knowledge in a lot of different areas, and if something comes along you want to discuss, you could get some feedback from them, or they could take a look at plans as you generate them and give you feedback from their perspective. So I think that would be a net positive for your operation, and I think it would make it stronger. And I think that's, oh yeah, one last shot. I really like the mixers that used to be sponsored by this organization. And I like them because I could go there and meet people from the theater world, and we could cross-pollinate ideas, and I think it was good for all of us. So I'd like to see if they could happen again. That's it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And Commissioner DeFranco.
Well, just wanted to say all the suggestions are phenomenal. They're exactly, I think, what we would need to have. The advisory group of the artists in the community would be great. The mixers would be fine. It's just I want to make sure that financially we would have the way things are budgeted. I don't know how we are going to do it. Not that we won't do it, because there are issues here that we are trying to see how we can pull things from one side to the other. So that is great. And it's great that, your organization and organizations as yours come and participate and give us advice, because this is exactly what we are intending to follow. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
And I just wanted to add for staff follow-up on the concept of having a working group in the community or some sort of ability for the community to come together as their own voice. Essentially, I think we would, personally, I think that's something worth following up on to the extent that we can help you do that in the community. I don't know if it's something that we can necessarily instigate ourselves, but perhaps a follow-up at a later meeting or with staff on that would be appropriate. Commissioner Gregorian.
Before that, does that mean that if there is going to be an advisory artist group in the community, they'll be working with the commissioners and the staff, or it means that it should be a separate situation?
It's not a place for discussion. I simply want to bring this forward again at a later time and have him connect with staff on it.
Okay, by the way, there was an analogy with the city government. They had a downtown plan, and they set up a steering group of business people from the different parts of the city who contributed to the plan. And I looked online, and they seemed to be pretty happy to get that kind of input from the community.
Commissioner Gregorian.
Mr. Humboldt, your suggestions are very well taken and very valid. I thank you for that. A couple of issues that you mentioned, as you know, we are in a transitional period, and I agree with the mixers. There were great opportunity for us to mix and mingle and know each other, etc. And maybe as a partner with us, your organization can start organizing this once a month and inviting everybody, and hopefully we can expand it and make it, somehow more inclusive of everybody. So I don't know if you have thought about that, but as you know, we as a group and as a city government, we need a lot of support from the community and from the organizations. And maybe that would be just my suggestion for now. And I'm sure you know for a long time that I have been a very big advocate of forming a Friends of Arts and Culture Commission before. And just like we have Friends of Library, Friends of whoever, and I'm not quite sure what the legal issues are, and I don't know how we can form this. We can definitely discuss this in future arts and culture meeting, in proper agendize it, etc., etc. But before that Friends of Arts and Culture, if it is formed and realized, I'm sure you know that we are all very approachable. We always welcome your comments and the community comments. I certainly have made myself available for everybody, including yourself and your organization, and I'm sure my colleagues have. So while we are still working, and this is a work in progress, please don't wait for us, and you also, put your input into it, because it's very valuable. And one of the reasons that you were awarded the Diamond Awards is because of your organization's value and input in the community. And, I congratulate you for that. So it is just a, partnership together with the community to move forward, and that's what we are trying to do.
Well, terrific. I think we'll take that as our homework to take a look at how this could happen, whether it's something we do, whether we do it as friends of the Arts and Culture Commission. And I think along the way we ought to spend some time talking informally with you all about these things.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
And you are always welcome to do so more in the future.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. So at that, I'd like to reopen back to where we left off for Commissioner comments with regard to the presentation and the item before us.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask.
Commissioner Gregorian.
Okay, I was waiting for my colleague to start,
Go
but
ahead.
it seems that she's still.
I'm still stuck with something in between what was discussed here. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. First of all, again, congratulations, Anna. This is a terrific document that you have prepared. It includes everything that we have discussed. We can, kind of polish it and make it happen and work. But there is a lot of hard work, and it shows. And I'm glad that after all these several months of really hard work, both from us and from staff, we are getting to somewhere that we really should be. So you've done a terrific job, you and the library staff and the director and all that. So my congratulations, because this is a great document, and I'm very excited about it. Having said that, a couple of questions which I'm not quite sure. It's a little vague for me, but after clarifying, then I will make a very short comment, because I think this document kind of completes everything. On the first document, which is called the interdepartmental communication, there is a proposed budget of 2013 and 2015, 2 years, but then on the arts and culture work plan, the very same budget is proposed for 2014-15. That's probably a typo.
It's a typo.
Okay, good. All right, thanks.
Thank you for catching that.
I just wanted to make sure that this is clarified. The way I see it, and also I have another question. On this chart that you have given us, on when it says temporary permanent art on city property, on that line, 3 lines from the bottom of that chart, the total there is 15 plus 40, which is 55. But then in this table that we have, the very same item is allocated for 80,000. Can you explain what that is?
It was just miscalculation on my part. I think I had tried to split it just, I think it was supposed to be 15 and then probably the remainder, so 50, what would that be?
If it is 15 and 40, it's 55, then this 80,000 goes down by about $35,000, which
Yes.
gets us closer to our goal. That's basically what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah, this was, again, another typo on my part. I apologize. I'm usually
Okay.
better
So
about
which one
catching
is
things
correct?
like this. Well, what the commission had initially proposed was 80,000. So the question is, do you want to keep it at 80,000 or do you want to reduce it along with some of the other ones if you want to bring it down to 150,000? You can set a budget at any amount that you want, but it was the commission's goal to keep it on an average for 150,000 per year. So right now you had proposed 80, but you can reduce that or increase that area if you want to cut out another program at this point.
Okay. So we don't know if it's 80 or 55 according to this chart yet.
It's up
It's up to us to decide.
Yes.
Correct? Okay, great. And also, this Michael Kalish sculpture, which is, I believe, it is going to be installed this year.
Yes.
So for next, this 16,500 is going to be completely used for this year. And for year 2014 and 15, we don't have that expense, correct?
We probably won't. I've included it for next year just in case if the invoicing comes in. There's generally a 30 to 60-day turnaround and when payments are issued. So it's included for expenditure this year, but just in case if we miss the cutoff for paying it in this fiscal year, it'll come out for next year. So we can reduce it by 16,000 or we can just completely take it out of this if you want, but only a little bit of money, I think, compared to the other ones.
Well, of course, yes,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
And on this whole thing, where does the Diamond Awards come? Is this the cultural programming or the Diamond Awards are out in this budget for the next couple of years?
The Diamond Awards were not included as one of the top, I remember when I asked you for the top 3 priorities. Majority of the commission didn't include that in the top 3, and it was the direction that you would fundraise for that event if you wanted to continue it. So we have not included it as a general fund expenditure for the next 2 years because it was the commission's hope that you would fundraise to be able to put on that event.
Okay, so this budget and this chart does not include the Diamond Award.
That's correct.
Okay, a couple of other questions, and then I will leave my comments for later. But on this website and okay, let's say on the website, who will overlook this, the completing of the design and the layout and the content of it? Who is going to be responsible for it?
I'm actually sitting on the city committee that's designing the city website, and one of the components would be the arts and culture website. So I would be the staff person responsible for it, but then the commission can nominate one commissioner or two commissioners to also serve unofficially as a panel. So I am going to be the staff person, but essentially the layout and the design is going to be consistent with the city website. All of the websites are going to have a consistent look to it.
So I suppose the same applies for the newsletter also.
The newsletter, we have more flexibility with the design of it, but our office will be responsible for that.
Okay. And a couple of other questions, the same thing like the Open Studio Tour, like the performing art programs, like the cultural programming, and like the this tree. How and when are we going to start working on this and, making sure the guidelines, what they are for us to start, implementing them?
As soon as you identify, or as soon as you approve the work plan today, we can begin to develop the process for issuing grants. It was the Commission's intent that you would, issue grants or RFPs for the temporary art projects, the Open Studio Tour performing arts programs, and cultural programming. So we will create that process in the next, 3 months before we can begin issuing. So our goal is, if you approve this today, then between April and July, we'll come up with that process and decide what kind of programming you want under each of those categories.
And I suppose Diamond Awards can be included in one of these if we choose to.
The Diamond Awards cannot be funded through the Urban Art Fund. That was the issue that we had. It would need to be funded through the general fund, and the Commission's priorities for the general fund were, the temporary art displays in parks, the website, which is now free, and then general administration. So the Diamond Awards is not an eligible program that can be funded through Urban Art, so we would either have to use general fund dollars or fundraise.
I'm having a little difficulty in apprehending why Diamond Awards would not be qualified for the for the Urban Art Fund, but I don't want a discussion now. Maybe we can have it on a later time.
I can explain. The Urban Art Fund is only to fund permanent or temporary art plans or art sculptures, performing arts or capital improvements for the purposes of art. The Diamond Awards is more of a recognition ceremony for artists. It's not an actual art program where there's temporary art, like a series of temporary art programs, performing arts programming. So that's something we did look into, and it's not covered under the Urban Art Fund. That's the other issue with the temporary art displays in parks. The art fund the Urban Art Fund can't just pay for the insurance premiums unless it's part of a larger project. So that's why our really small, general fund budget gets quickly eaten up by just the one program.
Okay, I heard you. Not that I agree with you, but I'm not going to continue, but I heard you. And that's a good explanation, but I disagree with some of the things. Anyway, I think these are the questions that I had. I might make comments later on, unless, or do you want me to make my comments also? That's very short. Let's hear all the questions and things then.
Yeah, if there are any questions, I can answer them, and then we can just go into the direction items. That would be helpful.
Okay.
Number one, you were telling us that if an artist donates an artwork, it would cost us $20,000 to $30,000 just to hang it or have it or receive it?
I gave an example. For example, the Michael Kalish sculpture that is donated to the city, we're responsible for transporting and installing it, and the foundation for that needs to be engineered, and we have to build a foundation for that. Something like that can cost $20,000.
It is a sculpture, and it is outside. But if we have a permanent kind of location that we could have artwork installed, I don't see why $20,000 to $30,000 would be spent on that. But that will go later on That's just was a question. The next one, the website that we are talking right now, currently, previously for several months, if not years, work was done on it. I want to see all the work and collected information is going to be used, or your guys are going to start from scratch and disregard all the major work that was done.
We're not going to discard the work. There was some content that's available on the previously designed website that we will integrate. But again, the layout and the design, we don't even have access to it anymore because it was designed, I think, by an intern and former employee. So the content we can pull out and put that into the new website, and the new website, the design and the layout is going to be consistent with the citywide website design.
I think Chairperson Deaver was very much involved with that, and from what I understand, about 80%, if not more, of the information and work that needs to be done was there. So that might ease, maybe hopefully decrease the costs of the website, whatever needs to be done, because the content is there, it's just, it needs to be formulated into the new structure. Just those two questions. Thank you.
I have lots.
Commissioner Kavalian.
All right. So, actually, it's more comments, not really questions. My comment is that why are we issuing grants for all 4 of the grant categories that we have here all at once? Most grants are technically, especially now with the economy being so in a shaky state, you have lots of organizations doing biannual. So if we stagger it out, then we don't have to deal with the big number at the bottom. If we stagger out, for example, if for the first year or even 2 years, we just did temporary arts projects as a grant and limited that to a $50,000 budget, and then a year or 2 years after that, or even we could even stagger them out, depending on how many applicants we get. So 1 year we do, for example, programming, and then next year we do cultural programming, and the next following year we do neighborhood beautification murals, because that's usually how even competitions are the same way. You never have a piano competition every single year. You usually have different instruments or vocal, for example. So it's the same kind of idea. And then in terms of capital improvements on city facilities, have we? So I'm really confused as to what that entails.
Well, we're going to have to explore what that entails. For example, Glendale Arts Association has asked that we make improvements to the lower level of the Civic Auditorium for an art installation. I need to coordinate with the Parks Department to find out if we can even make those, if we can make those enhancements, to find out what the cost is of installing the lighting, and then we need to go through a plan check, to do a lot of the heavy-duty lighting that we need to know. And we also need to coordinate to make sure that they're not booked with events during the time when we need to do that construction. So that's why we are projected to maybe complete. It's not a lot of work, it requires coordination because it's an enterprise venue that they use as a moneymaker. So if they're completely booked, then we have to fit that in. And if the lower level of the Civic doesn't work, then we have to look at another space. But I'm hopeful that that's a good location for these changes.
I agree that that would be a great facility to renovate and to make more friendly to the arts. However, to dedicate $65,000 to a project that's kind of up in the air is kind of scary for me. Is there any way? It's kind of like putting the cart before the horse in a sense. I would love to find out why that money is used and where it's going to be used before I say yes, let's do it. That doesn't make sense for me.
If it were recategorized as an exploration of facilities and capital improvements, so because I assume that within, like if a year passes and we haven't been able to identify a facility or that we could reallocate those funds. I mean, we're approving this or something, but there is some flexibility in that if
Yeah,
the
there-
project falls through.
Yeah, there is flexibility. What we could do is we would do like a one-year update to this plan. If we realize we're doing much more programming than we anticipated and we need to cut in other areas or we need to reallocate, we can do that. What the 65,000, we're not going to spend it all. This is taking into consideration that we explore that facility, and this covers all of the work that needs to go into renovating. And before we spend that money, you know, we would obviously come back with a report detailing what that is. So it may be far less than what we're projecting or more. And at that point, you can decide whether or not you want to reallocate more funding or if it's going to be too much money.
Okay, because, I mean, we're talking about making that number that, you know, that's listed under total. We're working to make that to $150,000. It'd be really easy if we just got rid of that item. And then later, if we decided to add it, then to add it later. So that's kind of my issue with that item, because 65,000 is like some arbitrary number. Then why don't we just call it $100,000? Because we don't know, and there's a lot of different things. That's kind of my point. So then why don't we just drop that number to 50,000 and make life a little easier for us in terms of the math?
Could I say something? Usually, based on the whatever, rooms or sections or centers that they have had the lighting and the hookup for the artwork, I have never heard anything around 65, even from the different departments that I've contacted before, because we wanted to use the one of the locations, and the lighting was already taken out, and I asked them to give me a calculation of how much it would be, because we wanted to use it for man's inhumanity to man. But, so basically, as you said, that's an arbitrary number and et cetera, but I don't want anything to be taken. What worries me listening to all this conversation is somehow I don't see anything happening soon. And with the Civic Auditorium, truly, as a beginning and as a city location and as a prestigious location, as many, many different things, as I mentioned, it scares me seeing things happening not as fast as it needs to be. Is there a way we could expedite the procedure?
There are a couple of projects or programs that can be implemented, because I did take that into consideration, and Commissioner Kevanian, you know, the budget and the programming schedule that you have is very, very robust. So I also wanted to show you how much is going to be going on and how much you're spending, so that it is a little bit overwhelming when you look at it. The couple of programs that can be implemented quickly, you know, we can have like a mural program for the downtown, something that's implemented in July. And that's a very low-cost way for the commission pretty much to make a splash in the downtown area, and just to let people know that you're working on it. That's why it's also important for us to develop the process for issuing the grants right now, so we can begin spending that money in July. You could also consider a temporary, at this point, probably a temporary, some sort of a temporary art program on city property, because we own the facility. We could quickly, if you could identify what kind of a program you want in the next couple of months, we could do that. And another is, if you choose to continue GATE with the consultants that are on board, it's a program that's kind of been waiting for additional funding. So
all great and fair, but what happens with the Civic Auditorium that the community has already asked for it? And it is, for years, it has been a request, not only for the time being. How could we expedite that one, and what would be the timeline? Is there a way we could kind of procedurize that, because that needs to start and to be continued to become a tradition for our artists. The rest are all temporary things that we could do for May or June or July, but our community and artists should know what is available, so they would make their reservations and they could do all the procedural things for different events that they have. So that would be the foundation. That would be something that we could really depend on and rely on and go on with. The rest are little programs that could be done any time of the year, this year or other. So is there a way you could?
This is, I heard it loud and clear last month that this is a priority, but as I mentioned, we can't just quickly go in and install the lighting because we're going to need to go through just plan check for the improvements that need to take place, and then we need to find out how long it's going to take. If it takes 3 weeks for all this work to happen, I need to make sure that the Parks Department hasn't reserved that space for that period of time, because that's another thing is we need to look into it. So I'm coordinating with the Parks Department. I actually just met with them to even find out if they're going through renovations. So the discussion has happened. It's just if you choose to move forward, then we need to look and see how quickly it can be implemented. But I want the community and the commission to realize that's an enterprise fund. That's a moneymaker for the Parks Department. So if they have it booked up solid for the next 7 months, and that's the first opportunity we have to actually make those improvements, we're going to have to work with that schedule. We know that it's a priority, and you know, we want to do that, and the Parks Department is excited to be able to provide those infrastructure upgrades. We just need to work with their department and make sure that we can streamline it.
So if we kind of finalize certain things today for our next commission meeting, can you give us a timeline on when we can hope that we could have our civic auditorium in place?
I'm not sure. I'm going to have to coordinate with the Parks Department. If an update is available, I can provide you with an update, but just know that the conversation has started with the Parks Department. Since it is their facility, I need to find out what's happening with their facility before we can make those changes. So,
okay, thank you.
Would you like to follow up your rest of your comments?
I think I've kind of made up my mind in terms of what I would like to see. I can go ahead and straight away tell you that.
okay.
So the actual programs I would like to see are the temporary arts, the grants, in the sum of $30,000. Then next is the neighborhood beautification, multiple and mural, $20,000 is fine. The Michael Kalish sculpture is in already. Capital improvements, fine with the $65,000, and then basically you have your maintenance and conservation and discretionary items. That should pretty much do with the
Just
total.
to clarify, the commission also has the opportunity to issue an RFP for the temporary arts. So, you know, if you choose to keep
Exactly.
the $80,000, you can say $50,000 is going to go towards Project X, which is this is what we want, and then the remainder you could do grants. So.
What I would really like to see is actually if we have these in place for at least the next 2 years, if not even actually if they might even incur in less time.
Okay.
And that what we can start doing is then working on the other stuff in the meantime. Like for example, if that $20,000 for the mural grant goes out in one project, then we can start working on the other things to set up for the future. And also to say, especially with the temporary or permanent art on city property, that's a huge one. But I don't think we're ready for that quite yet.
And when you discuss the future, do you mean in the next 2 fiscal years or like
Right.
beyond that?
No,
Because
no.
okay, because what we need to do is we need to. I mean, as difficult as it is, you need to look at what you're going to be doing for the next 2 years. Some we can implement right away. As I mentioned, you know, a mural program, you can quickly do something like a smaller temporary art project. You can implement quickly, and the capital improvements. That's something that we're going to be working on. And then some of the other projects which do take a little bit more planning. For example, a temporary art project. We can push that out into year 2, but we need to plan for that. An approximate, you know, budget number would be helpful right now. And then, as I mentioned, you know, sometime next spring we can revisit the budget and find out if we need to allocate more or reduce funding in a specific area.
And that's exactly why I don't think we can do all of these at the same time. And also, to answer the gate question, in my mind, within the time period of that first 2 years that we're making plans for until 2015, during that time, when one of these other items are off the list, we can start then going through RFP process to reinstate the gate program, instead of just budgeting it out now and then trying and just going. What I don't want to see happen is like your hugely four-folded piece of paper says over here, that when you look at this, it's very scary. This is, if somebody said, Armand, go and do all of this work, I would say you couldn't pay me enough money to do this, because this is a lot of work, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I'm not, no judgment on staff or anything, but this is just a lot of work, and it would be a horrible thing for us to get to try to do all these things and then not have any of it really get done properly.
Well, I guess what would be easier for me to know is there a certain, for example, the commission identified the open studio tour as something you want to see continue, but you don't want to be managing it. You want to just have somebody else take it on and handle that. So at that point, it would be the commission, putting out an RFP and then paying the money, and you're not going to be responsible for the work. But then some other project, the policy is going to take up most of your time, as it should. So some of these, it's going to be, again, staggering it, and then we have to look into it more specifically in the next few months. What do you want some of these program areas to look like? Do you want to identify a focus area? So what would be helpful right now is if there is a line item that you're comfortable with eliminating for the next 2 years or reducing, let me know, because then we can look into staggering out the programs, what we can implement right away, what can we do 6 months out, a year out, 18 months out.
I just gave you my easiest road out of this. That's basically,
Okay.
those are the things that I think we can do successfully in a very short period of time. That we don't get caught up in the runaround of finding RFPs or whatever. And these are the ones that I think are the easiest, and I think can be the most successful. And as you mentioned earlier, can make the biggest splash.
Could you repeat those again?
Certainly. Actually, I think Ms. Spartani would have a better list. I think I drew too many lines on this piece of paper at this point.
You said temporary art projects, but I don't know how much you allocated. And it's
30,000.
30. Okay, mural 20,000, capital improvements to city facilities 60, and then a discretionary amount plus the Michael Kalish sculpture installation.
And the mural.
Mural, yes, 20.
Yeah.
Commissioner Gregorian?
Thank you, Mrs. Chair. I certainly would prefer to stay within the 150,000 budget that we originally discussed, and there are several reasons for it. Number one, this is a first year we are having all these programs, and I don't want to go out and get crazy and spend money unnecessarily. This is public funds. We have to be as frugal about it as possible. And I understand that there might be some more funds coming in, but there will always be good uses for these funds in the future. So my personal feeling is 150,000 is the max that I'm willing to spend, at least for the first year. And of course, at the end of the first year, when although this is a 2-year budget, but what I would like to see is at the end of the first year, we revise and see, where we come short, where we were overspent, where we were under budget or over budget, and then maybe polish it or massage it for the next year. So $150,000 is my budget. And when I look at this this chart, I can see that we can easily achieve that without many cuts that we expect. First of all, as I had asked the question, the temporary or permanent art on city property, which here the chart says 80,000, but then it adds up 55,000 on the other chart, whatever it's called, on the spreadsheet. I would like to keep that at 55,000 as it is, for the very simple reason. For 2013. We are allocating 15,000 for 4 months, in a 4-month period. And for the whole year of next year, or actually, 6 months of next year, probably double that or a little more would be sufficient. So 40,000, as the spreadsheet shows, I think it's more than enough. And with the 15,000 for this year, we will know at the end of the year whether this was sufficient, and we can do it. But 40,000 next year is fine. So if we reduce the temporary or permanent art on city property from 80,000 based on this chart to 55,000 as the spreadsheet says, there is a $25,000 already. And my position on the gate exhibitions have been quite well known and very clear. I think 80,000 is really too high for that project. If we cut that by half, another 40,000, so we are well within our budget of 150,000 a year. And I don't think we should touch any other programs in there because they're all good. The neighborhood mural program is great. The cultural programming is good. Everything else, open studio tour, temporary arts project, everything is good. And I kind of agree with my colleague that the temporary art project might be too high, 80,000. And if we can save money in there, great. Then we are under budget, under 150,000. We don't have to get crazy and go out and spend all that 150,000 just because we have it. Okay. And also, I agree with my colleague, Commissioner Derhovanesian, that we need to speed this up. And I understand the government, the bureaucracy, all the departments have to approve, the city attorney has to sign off, and all the other good issues, and the budgeting, and etc. I understand all of that. But what I'm trying to say is, now that we have come all the way forward, let's try to cut this time as much as possible and move forward as fast as possible and get to some results so that for next year, when we are revising the budget, we will have something a lot more concrete on our hands. And on this capital improvements, again, yes, there are all kinds of things involved, building department and, all the other stuff. I understand that. But depending on what we want to do, depending on what the design is, 65,000 may be too much, as my colleague says, or might be too little. It really depends on what we want to do with that space. And obviously that will be in collaboration with the Community Services and Park Department. And I think 65,000 might be a little too high in there, but we never know. And I would like to not concentrate on only the lower level of the Civic Auditorium, but I think the upper level has a lot of potential that we should look into. So I think 150,000 is the top budget and easily achievable by these two little cuts that I was expecting.
I agree with him. If need be, we could sit with you again and look at all the little details, but that's exactly how I feel about the whole thing.
So you recommend the same cuts?
The way all the different jugglings and cuttings and addings and etc. that we have, yes, we need to look at it, and then if need be, if you want, we could get together and then look at it.
Well, I need the direction today, and if you want to approve, I think the Commission's goal was to approve it today, given the April elections may change the dynamics a little bit. So, is your, we might have, just a couple of you left. So,
I agree.
I would like to add to the conversation before we put anything on the floor on this. I actually have a question. Going back to the questions, actually on the general fund piece, the temporary art display in parks at our 5,000. Does that cover? I think I know the answer to this, but does that cover just the insurance component as opposed to the capital improvement component that may need to occur, or would the capital improvement component that might need to occur be able to come out of the art fund?
That cost, most of it is 90% is going to go to pay for the insurance, and then we anticipate some staff costs, but it's not going to be as much, and then we don't need to do any capital improvements on those sites because we can't make any major adjustments to the parks facility, so most of the spaces, the artwork has to go on a wall or on a surface, so there isn't much cost to that.
I know it's not extensive, but there is cost associated with the hanging and any potential areas that there might be possibility for lighting and things like that. So I was just curious or wanted to put on the floor that potentially would be coming out of this capital improvements line item. Theoretically, it could.
It could, if we
had to. Or if the program expanded further, for instance, and we identified other spaces in parks where we could have. Okay. In general, I know we're only looking at two years out, but I think it's good to have some sort of escalation when we're looking at like general administration, so like not having the same every, obviously going up a few percent. It's not a whole lot of money, but I just wanted to account for that. On the urban art fund component, I agree in general with my fellow commissioners overall. I think conceptually, we want to hit the ground running with 1 or 2, 3 projects that we know are going to make an impact so that we can continue to get the support. And so identifying that is what's appropriate. I would agree that certainly the GATE program, the infrastructure is there, whether we do it on an RFP process. I agree that I think that the amount that has previously been contracted, which this number is based on for a year, was $80,000 for a year, I believe, seems a bit high. I know some of that goes into the insurance costs and the coordination costs with the property owners. It's not, there's a lot involved in it. But to the extent that we can reduce that a bit, I think what was proposed at the $40,000, which would be $20,000 a year, assuming that we want to have this an ongoing thing, seems a little bit light to me, actually. But I haven't done the research. I would leave that to staff to kind of refine based on what you know of, what's happening in the community in general, different types of providers. The discretionary fund, I think, does need to increase. I think that $15,000 over 2 years seems pretty light, knowing that just exciting, cool things could come up that we didn't budget for, and we're suddenly at a loss, and I would hate to see that happen. The capital improvements, I also agree that number could be high, it could be low, we don't know. It's almost a policy piece, and I know that there's a lot of support for it and there's a lot of enthusiasm for it, but I'm glad to know that you had the conversation, so at least the Parks Department is open to that conversation. We didn't even know that coming into it, but I would caution the community in general in putting a lot of money or time, assuming that that's going to be done, say, in the fall, because there's just so many unknowns in terms of whether we can do it, how we can do it. So just from a pragmatic standpoint, I'm concerned about that, but not saying I don't want to push for something, whether it's there or someplace else. It's certainly a priority. But just knowing that from a conservative standpoint, I don't want anybody to get hung out to dry on it, frankly. But we can start with those conversations, hit the ground running with that and put the money towards it, as long as we know we have some money out there to be able to make as improvements as possible, or to be able to get the time or bring in a consultant or whatever needs to happen to find other potential spaces, whether they exist at city facilities now or something in the future. The open studio tour, just to confirm, we're at the $7,000 that we have it in here would be for the 1 year without an intention of that necessarily being able to go into the second year. It would sort of be a starter fund.
That's only for 1 year for next summer, so that would be for that one fiscal year, and then it would be, this would almost serve as seed money for, a Glendale organization to take that and to build up open studio tour and then continue it on as a self-sufficient program.
And we've yet, as a commission, to really identify what that actually is or what we want it to be in the future. Again, the $7,000 actually seemed possibly a little bit low to me. Like $10,000 seemed like a better matching type of fund for that type of program.
In past years, when this was a commission project, the cost was between $5,000 and $7,000, but the staff was paid for. City staff dedicated their time, so it's anticipated that if a group takes it on, that they have their staff and that they're able to match some of that money, so that it's not 100% funded through the commission, that whatever organization wants to take on whatever you envision the open studio tour to be. You've all said you want it to be a bigger, better program, then they would match those funds.
There might be volunteers, like if it's an organization that, let's say, just an example, let's say Glendale Arts Association. They are all volunteers. Mostly they show their artwork and pieces in there, and they might want to even volunteer for this, their membership. And again, I'm not putting this burden on any organization as of this moment, but yes, there might be matching funds or volunteer or how to say the in-kind contributions. So I think 7, and with the $65,000 that I proposed, we are actually going down to $152,000. So there is another $3,000 in there to play with. So.
Well, thank you. So I don't know if I commented on this, but I'm not going a little bit out of order. But the temporary art projects does seem. I always thought that seemed a little bit high as well, particularly for these first couple starter years. Just running through my notes.
Is there a certain amount you would feel more comfortable with?
I would say, 60 or 7. I mean, maybe 60,000. from my perspective. I don't remember what was out
Which
on
one?
the floor.
Which item?
For the temporary arts projects, multiple grants.
I had said
Commissioner
30.
Keimanian said
30.
30, so
That's 15,000 a year then. Yeah, I'm not feeling quite as tight on that one. There's room in the budget. I would rather have that a little bit more personally. Are there other thoughts on that one?
I'm sorry, I meant 30,000 a year.
Oh,
Sorry.
well now we're
Okay,
in
so
alignment.
then-
Look at that.
Yeah.
Armand.
No, that sounds
It's
good.
confusing. It is when we look at these numbers. and you
It
have to
is, and
realize.
sometimes, and the reason I didn't break it down by year, like with the general fund, is, because we were going to have a lot of, crossover between the years and the programs and when we actually issue the money. So I try to simplify it, but, think of these as over a 2-year period, so.
I have the question about the murals, because I think we had talked about that, or it's been talked about as being something we could hit the ground running with in particular. Do you anticipate there to be some time lag in that we don't necessarily have sites? I don't even know what the ordinances are for murals and signage and all that type of thing, and being able to either find city property and or find private owners that are willing to participate in this program. As much as I like the idea of we just throw out an RFP and we know there's folks out there that would respond, I'm worried about the administrative side of that.
To my knowledge, the ordinance that we have pertaining to murals is sign-related. So if you recall, Panera had a mural that was painted, but that was almost like a sign. But I can revisit that. I think artwork is not necessarily addressed in our zoning code, but I can check in with the Community Development Department to find out, and if we do need to look into it, we can.
And are we thinking about, or has it even been thought, is it city properties that we're thinking that we could start with, or are we thinking of having conversations with private owners?
Well, the fastest, if the zoning code, doesn't address art murals as, a violation of any code, then we could easily, implement it on city property if we could identify with different departments, where with the private property it would take a little bit more coordination.
Or construction projects potentially as well,
Yes.
or temporary murals?
As long as they are not graffiti, right?
Street art, graffiti,
I know, some people love
Yeah,
murals,
depends.
some people don't. So, one of those moments where I'm hoping this is making more sense to you than maybe it is to me at the moment of what I'm commenting.
Yeah, I just have one follow-up question for the commission, but I'll let you go through your comments.
I have a question. Could I ask?
Yes.
For gate, when you guys presented it at the city council, there was a suggestion. I wanted to see if that was taken seriously or not. As far as, since different organizations, they're offering their location, it's a kind of a commercial advertisement for them as well. Do they participate in any way financially in that endeavor, or they are not? It just, they just give their space? Because that was suggested that it would be nice if they would do that.
I do know that the property owners that do open up the space, some of them have paid for the infrastructure and the maintenance to be able to accommodate the art. Others pay for the electricity have the lights on 24 hours a day for the community to see. So there is a little bit of a cost for the property owner, and depending on the property owner, they've contributed more than others.
So where did this $80,000 go? Do we have a breakdown of, what was it?
I think several months ago I gave a presentation. I can't remember what all the numbers are, but it went to marketing. Yeah, it went to marketing. It went to some supplies. We had to provide some money to build out the space to be able to accommodate the art. And then there was insurance. And then there was also the consultant fee, since, somebody was doing the work.
I had just a couple more things before we get into that. Looking at the graph and looking at the timing on the temporary permanent art on city property is fairly aggressive, and I'm just trying to recall if there's something that we think is potential for that, or
it was something that we could potentially, incorporate, but then I think at one of the meetings a council member asked about, temporarily displaying, Mona signs. So again, we're coordinating with Kim to find out what's the location, so we're not committing any funds to anything, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how quickly some things could be implemented as opposed to others.
Okay. And my other comment then is, in looking again at the graph and sort of the timing is what we're playing around with. In terms of the performing arts, I would love to see moved up a little bit. And this speaks a little bit to Commissioner Kivanian's point about staggering things. I think we're not always thinking about we're going to spend $70,000 and throw out an RFP and ask people to start producing work everywhere, but we could be more targeted and say, in the fall we want to have a big, dance performance in the downtown someplace or in one of the neighborhoods, and then in the fall we would like to have an art installation. So I think this is overwhelming as it's laid out here, but in terms of that staggering between very specific projects that we're sending out an RFP on and a more generalized grant process where we're asking the community to respond with projects that they have in mind that would be community-oriented, makes it a little bit more manageable. But so long as that we're starting with something like the GATE program, if we can do something like the MONA project initially, and the Kalish project, which is going up. I think those are I think there was one other one in
mural
there. Yeah, the mural projects. If those three, I think that would that's a lot to do, but it also has a lot of bang for the buck, essentially, in that first year. You had a comment.
I actually just wanted to add on, Chair Deaver, that it's a quantity and quality issue. What we don't want in these RFP processes is just a bunch of people who are, we have a little timeline, we got to get it in because the city, it's on, it's in the policy, it's in this and that. We don't want to do that. We want to have really quality items that we know we're getting, bang for the buck. So that's what it's all about. I mean, when you think of performing arts in Glendale, I can only think of a handful of organizations. But if people know that this process is happening and they can see it a year or two down the line, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what huge organization from LA or a surrounding area or across the country might even apply for this project. And instead of having some rinky-dink thing because of the schedule says we have to get it done, so therefore we gave the money to whoever it is. We don't know, we just had to do it. And then all of a sudden you have a huge applicant from someplace else who comes in and gets snuffed because there's no more money left. So we don't want that to happen. That's why I'm suggesting the staggering process. And again, I'd much rather have 4 projects in the next 2 years than 8 if the 8 cannot be done with the same quality as the 4. That's simply where I'm at with this, and I'm...
I have a question on that. Exactly, I believe in whatever you're saying, and that's how it needs to be done. But to choose the quality and not the quantity, which should be the aim, naturally, how are we going to make a decision on what is the quality and which ones are supposed to be chosen for the given year?
Well, that's an entirely different issue. The reason being is because just like how for the Diamond Awards, how we have a subcommittee, that may be the process for the grant, that may not be. I have no idea. I think it's way too early in the ballgame to tell. I think right now it's more about apples and oranges than deciding who's going to get what money or whatever.
I know, but when you're talking about apples and oranges, you need to know what kind of a salad you're making or dessert you're making. So I would like to know exactly, not exactly, but that has to be on the back burner as well as what is procedurally going to choose that quantity.
And that's what we're going to work on.
Right.
After you approve how much you want to spend and you say,
We can order
okay,
the salad
we want to
together.
do temporary art projects, then you'll get into, well, what kind of temporary art projects do we want, and are we going to issue grants, or do we want proposals, and then what's the subcommittee that's going to select what's going to be picked? So
One more item. Last time I discussed that too. Whenever any kind of installation is, because I've experienced that in the past 2 years, and I hope that would not happen again. Whenever something is done, like in the MONA thing that we had, all the installations, lighting, and etc., when the project is over, I talked even, I think, with the planning department. I forgot with whom I talked to, but the thing was that let us keep whatever they have put there with less money, rather than, that means to buy it from them. I know that different organizations come and pay for it, and they do the lighting and installations and et cetera, the hookups. So before they leave, instead of dragging everything down and going, and for us, for using the same space for any kind of such event, to go and reinvent the wheel and pay $30,000 again to make it all happen, or $25,000 again, why not to buy it? Where should we, whom should I see, what should we do? So that would be a procedure that we would just save and keep all the wonderful things that are being done. So for future use, we do not spend money on it. Because on that one, if they would have thought about it in advance, we could have used that space without spending too much money. I mean, city would have had its own event there without spending too much money on that. So I don't know what's the procedure, but that's something that is very important to me. Whatever is invested, let's be wise on it and use it, and kind of make decisions, or which department should make decisions legally. I don't know. It just, let's make sure that we keep whatever is being built in our community centers.
Is this in relation to the building in which Mona is going to be going, where there was the art from the ashes?
Before, when we had the Mona exhibition and etc., they did, I'm very bad with names.
The art from the ashes?
Yes, and they had the lighting and everything installed for their beautiful, magnificent work. When they were done, so they took their stuff, because they put it there and they left. So the city could buy whatever they have put there, maybe with less amount of money, because when you have installed things and you have to pull it down, you ruin some part of whatever has been done. So that way it would be saving, and it would be helping us having many locations in the city that they already are equipped.
Okay, we can look into that in the future.
Okay. So if I need to talk to anybody in the city to make sure that could happen, that would be
If
good.
I understand, the consideration is for installation projects, if we find sort of permanent spaces for installation type of projects, if there's infrastructure that goes in for that, if there's a way of making that sort of a permanent, temporary installation space. Is that correct?
So, and when they leave, and if other organizations, if we do it to keep it, if other organizations come and pay for it, we buy it from them naturally with less money, because they are not going to use the same whatever they have done there, so that we could use it for our future use.
Commissioner Gregorian, you had a question or comment?
Actually, I think I was going to address the issue of quality, which I absolutely agree with my colleagues. And it is important, not only the quality that we put out, but also with the quality, it's the prestige of the city which is in line, which we really have to be very careful. And quality will always be achieved by using the proper consultants and the proper specialists. We are not, the jack of all trades, although we would like to think we are, but we are not. And, that's why we have these consultants for the CATE program. That's why we had the curator for the MIM program, and all the other issues. So I think the budget, which shows in there, if some of it goes to specialists and consultants to put out a real quality programming or whatever out there, I'm all for it. So quality is, very important, but it comes with who we use it.
That's correct. We could even use the Friends of the Arts and Culture Commission, or an advisory group that could look into it, or whatever is decided later on.
I have one other question, just a confirmation. The temporary art display in parks, again, in the chart, graph, this January 2014, is that when we would expect the first sort of display and all the work happening prior to that, right? Thank you.
Now, I just do need a clarification on gate. So if you looked at the chart, basically the council had asked, consider extending it for an additional year. So the $80,000 was for just 1 year. So you mentioned reducing it down to $40,000. Commissioner Gregorian and Chair Deaver, now did you see that $40,000 for 1 year or $40,000 split between 2 years? Because what we can do is next month invite the consultant to put that on to show you what the program would look like at that budget value. I think all of you are familiar with what happened with $80,000. They can go into that, and then if you reduce that amount, then they can tell you, well, what that budget will get you. we can do that for you if
If
you
you are
want.
addressing that question to me, since this is a 2-year budget for 80,000, obviously my suggestion of 40,000 for 2 years, my suggestion of 40,000 is for 2 years, so 20,000 per year. But if we are going to do it only this year and not doing next year, then I really don't have a problem with 40,000 for this year. But again, then we will be kind of imbalancing the budget.
And I would actually disagree with that. I would like to see it in more than that. I would like to see that being per year, so at least 40,000 per year, thinking, too, that expanding it potentially outside of the downtown into some of our other core business areas as appropriate. And maybe that could even be divided up into different types of programs. But I would look to hear from the community a little bit more about what we can get for those dollars, because I don't know. I mean, I know this happens in different cities with different consultants, and this is one particular consultant, which is, it's just one look at it. So it was certainly hearing from them what they could do, but I want to have a little bit more understanding of what the costs are out there from other communities, or when we did our original RFP process for this as well, how those came in comparison. So we want it to be robust, but it does seem high.
I think
Long answer to your question.
we all kind of agree on the fact that 80,000 is too much.
Okay, and I guess the question is, do you want 40,000 per year or 40,000 over?
40,000 per year is 80,000 for 2 years.
Well, I know initially, if you looked at my schedule, my colorful schedule, it was showing the 80,000 for just the 1 year, because I think that's what the commission had expressed. So if you want to split that up over the 2 years, and then I think something that the council had recommended was, looking at grant funding.
I know the council had recommended this, but we are the advisory to the council. We can go back to the council and say, you know what, we think 80,000 per year is too much. And then they will decide. They will override us if they want to. But just because the council wanted that, they wanted us to discuss, analyze, and make a decision. And if we think $80,000 is too much, then we have to tell the council we think $80,000 is too much.
And council
And I
wanted
understand that, and
organizations would participate a little bit more on that part. That means they would chip in because it's also an advertisement for their own locations. So,
well, what I need from the commission is to know how much you want to spend so that we can wrap this up.
I personally would put out on the table 40,000 per year so that we can look at a continuation over a couple of years. If we get some feedback after we've gone through this process that we're not going to get what we thought we would get for that, then we would have to reconsider that.
But 40,000 per year is just like this proposed budget is. Because this budget is for a 2-year
But you're looking
period.
at the graph, though. It was like we're saying we're going to, in this next fiscal year, we're going to do one program for $80,000. I'm concerned about making sure this is repeated into 2 years. But I don't want to spend $160,000 on that in this budget.
so 40,000 for each year and 80,000 for two, if the majority of us.
It doesn't change. It's not doesn't change your budget, but it changes how we're using that budget.
I tend to agree with Chair Deaver. I think that we should dedicate 40,000 a year if we're going to do this project properly. I mean, we know already that it's done with $80,000 to say 20,000. I think is a huge diminution in the.
Yeah, but still, as I said, one could negotiate with the owners of the locations as well. People spend a lot of money for their commercial purposes, so that location for people frequenting, going and using and seeing and all that stuff, you get a lot of ideas. I learned a lot about different locations going to the GATE program before, so that is major. So we need to get their participation, and 40,000 to me also, we could modify it later on. I mean, it's not written in stone, correct?
It might end up costing less.
Yeah, yeah.
And we can ask the consultant to come and give a presentation of what that 40,000 per year would look like, so you get a better idea of what the program is going to look like and how they expect to leverage those funds.
If I remember correctly, I think they actually ran into some issues with property owners about the flexibility of. I mean, there were some that we're really open to, and that's where we continue to have those exhibitions. But in general, as the economy improves, and if everything that's happening in the downtown does what it's supposed to, we're not going to have as many vacancies as well, and so it might not be as something that owners are willing to participate in. Just other side of that.
That's correct. So
Okay, well-
let's go for the time being and not spend too much time on that. 40,000 for 2 years, if everybody agrees. 40,000 for each year, 80,000 for 2, and see how it works. So we'll go to other items.
I'm sorry, I cannot vote for that. I just think that's too much, and I don't think I can vote for that. So as long as my position is clear, that's fine.
Sure.
That, I mean, I think I heard everything from the commission, your concerns and your feedback. So it looks like we have reduced the temporary art projects down to 60,000, the temporary or permanent art on city property down to 55,000. That brings us to an average of 175,000 per year. But again, I think the first year is going to be a lot less than the second year. So we're just a little bit over. But as I mentioned, next year we can revisit. And if we really are, not spending as much as we thought, we can get to that average again. If there are no other comments or questions, I'm just going to look for a motion for the commission to approve this budget, and then the coming months we'll actually develop the programming, what the focus area is going to be for July.
So with this, we are going to go $175,000 a year instead of 150 that we had proposed, correct?
Yes,
That's
it's going
what
to
it's
be
adding up to
yeah,
right now,
that's
so
what
that-
it's adding up to right now, but it's at your discretion. I mean, we had said, let's try and keep it at 150,000, but, it's your discretion to be able to spend a little bit more.
To me, I mean, there are a lot of items that it could be, less money could be spent on, but I don't know how we are going to itemize it. It's kind of, we need to have the experts to be, or responding to us individually, so we would know exactly where we stand.
I think once we develop what that focus area is, then you'll be able to know when you define what the program is, when you define what the temporary art project focus area is going to be, then that'll give you a better idea. Did you put, is 60,000 too much to look at, and then we can reduce it at that point.
And say for myself, I'd just throw this out as a comment, but I think the 175 is close enough, as you say, to our original budget goal, in that we've do we increase the discretionary in your number there?
The discretionary is not increased. It will need to be increased, but I think how we can consider the discretionary is almost like a contract contingency. If you want, we can include that in the total or not. I mean, I think we should.
I'd like
so what I would do is it would probably double that amount, so it'll probably put us up, another, 15,000.
About 180,000.
Yeah.
So let me ask this of commissioners: if we want to, are people comfortable with that number, or do we want to look at some other places to cut? Given again that in this first year we probably won't be expending as much money, the 65,000 for the capital improvements is in question, and that could go up or down, and we can revisit this after a year.
I have actually a bigger issue than any of that. Before even getting to that, I simply don't think that all of this work can be properly done in the timeline. I simply don't think so. That's my main concern. That is my main concern. So I mean, even before going to budget cuts, I simply don't think that I want to make sure that the quality is there. That's more important for me than if we do 50,000 projects. I can care less for that. I just want to make sure that everything is done accurately and done to the best.
And we can ensure that, and as we begin developing, these more specifically, and you realize that at $60,000, you can have a very, very robust temporary art program that has performing art and cultural art components, and you choose to eliminate those two and carry it over or maybe increase it a little bit. I mean, that's to your discretion right now. You're just giving yourself kind of the framework to work in, and then to be able to specify what you want to work in. So I agree, it is very robust, and that's kind of why I put that schedule together, so you would know how busy you're going to be. I'll be busy too, but
I won't be.
But well, wherever the commission is, in the next 2 years, you're going to have a very, very robust schedule. But the coming, 3 to 4 months, that's what we're going to do, is we're going to start honing in. And we're not going to be able to discuss every single thing over the next 3 months. We are prioritizing it, and whatever we can achieve quickly, that's what we'll focus on. There are policy areas that are very important to you that are going to take a lot of discussion. And then, so again, it's that staggering effect. And if a project takes much longer than we anticipate, then that just pushes some other things out. So I understand your concern.
I mean, I don't want to be a negative Nancy, but I'm just saying, I'm gonna support it either way. I just want to make sure that we all know what kind of contractual agreement we're all getting ourselves into. That's all I'm saying. I mean, I'm gonna vote yes for it, regardless. However, I'm just saying.
Well, let me ask this, though. Sorry, just one moment. If we get 7 months into this and we've implemented a couple of things and we get to the end of the 2 years and, we didn't spend all the money, we're not losing the money. It's not like it's going back into the general fund. So I don't have a huge discomfort with giving ourselves more flexibility in this plan. I hear you in terms of it goes to council and they have the same concern. We just need to make sure that it's explained thoroughly, that this gives us the flexibility, and we might scale back to, as we get into it. But it's a first shot at it, and it's better to not restrict ourselves, but to be cautious as we enter into the process, prioritizing to say the top 3 projects, and we'll start with those. We'll not worry about the rest of it until we get into the second year, and we will methodically move forward as we do.
I do agree with you. Because, as you said, the fact is that if the money does not go anywhere else, it goes back to where it is, and then it could be planned again for the next year. But if we get for less money and we cannot achieve what we want to do, then we might be tied to a lot of other issues. So as far as the money part is, I agree. As far as quality, but I'm not a money person anyhow. I'm more with the quality of how things, choosing what the quality should be. So
I just want to clarify my point. It's not the money. The money is not the issue. You could offer $100,000 for each one of these items and not get the right people. The point is the time. How much time are you really allotting to these? That's my issue. I could care less for the money. If the money is there, fine, let's go over budget. Let's plan big. Let's go for it. But if we don't have the staffing resources and we don't have the time and we try to cram everything in, that's where that's where all the little mistakes happen.
Ms. Cleary?
That's simply where I'm at. I don't want to prolong this because this is not. It seems like this is not an issue to anyone else. So if
the
that's
money part is not.
No. What I'm trying to say is I don't want to belabor this. I will support this. That's not the issue. I just want all of us to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to actually think about how long this is really going to take. I don't want us to start these projects and go, we're in big trouble because it's going to take way longer than we even thought it was. The money, forget the money. It's always there. It's just going to just go back into the budget. It's a time issue.
I personally think and trust that if the staff is presenting this to us, I think that they can accomplish it. So I'm just trusting the staff and the director of the department to deliver what your concern is. That's the answer to that, my position. If Ms. Cleary wants to discuss, that's fine. But I was going to try to propose a compromise where I can also vote for this. So if Ms. Cleary decides, then
Yeah, Ms. Cleary.
No, and I appreciate and understand your concern about how much time it will take to really accomplish quality programs. I just want to add one more thing to the conversation, and that would be whatever you do, we do need to be careful about how we raise expectations in the community. So if we put too much out there, the community may expect us to achieve that. And sometimes it's better to do a little less to begin with, so that you can see that you can accomplish it and that you don't raise expectations of doing more than you really can do. Now, having said that, I think Annette feels pretty assured that she can coordinate a lot of this. But I just felt it was important to add that to the discussion because the community is looking at us. They're looking for us to achieve. You're looking to make a splash in the community, and, I think all the points that everyone has said are very important, but one more thing to consider.
But it's true, we have seen Annette sending emails 9 or 10 o'clock at night and the weekends as well. So she's working very hard to even catch up with whatever we have here, and we do appreciate that anyhow. So,
Commissioner Gregorian?
yes.
So, I'm just a numbers person, as you know, and regardless of all the arts and whatever, my business requires me to do numbers every day, every second. With this budget that I'm seeing here, again, if we go over 150,000, and if we do the GATE program, with all due respect, for 80,000, I cannot support it. My compromise is, now that we have gotten the temporary arts project 20,000 less, let's allocate the 2-year budget for GATE instead of 80, let's do it 60. I was proposing 40. And if we do that for 60, which is either 1-year or 2-year expenditure, then we will be below the 150,000 that we originally thought, and that way I may be able to support this. So if my colleagues agree with the GATE program to go down instead of 80 to 60, then that would be fine.
And also, I understand Commissioner Kavani. Over to you, so it would be 30 each year. In response to Commissioner Kavanian, this is a lot. So again, rather than eliminating a line item, again, the Commission wants to reduce it. It doesn't reduce the amount of work that's going to go into this. So although I'll be facilitating grants, you're going to have to review that many more proposals. So we can chop off 10,000 from each of these, but again, you're still committed to that amount of work. So you can review and say, well, we can eliminate the cultural programming or the performing art program and tie that into temporary art, or you can reduce that or combine two of them together. So I want you to think of that, again, rather than cutting 5 or 10,000 is really not going to make a big impact. It's reducing it down to 150, but it's not eliminating any work for you or for me, but I'm just letting you know.
So budget-wise, we can go to that to get his vote on it as well, and then we could eliminate and see what we can cut from the activities. What do you think?
Well, I think I already told you what I think.
No. I mean, all of us.
About
What do
an
we
hour
think?
ago.
As far as the budget part, there are two parts of this. First of all, let's talk about the budget. Then we can go on into eliminating the programs that we are considering. So to take less time. So if budget-wise, we could go for GATE for 60 instead of 80, instead of 40 proposed initially. So budget part, we are okay, then we'll go ahead and see what we can cut from the activities that we are choosing.
I'm hearing two different concerns. One is budget, one is timing. So if I could get a clear direction from the Commission.
Timing is the most important.
I hear that as important. So again, the budget, it's at your discretion what you want the budget to be, but it's the timing again. So if you think this is too many projects to undertake, then we need to eliminate something. Or if you're comfortable with this, then we then go into the budget. But I'm hearing two separate conversations, and I can't complete this for you.
There's a motion on the table.
Is there?
There.
No, I didn't make a motion.
There's not a motion.
I just suggested a compromise.
I misheard you completely.
Okay.
Let me throw this out there, just to get interesting. What if we weren't looking at a 2-year, but we decided to do the 2-year budget because we thought it would be easier. I think what's happening is that it's not. Would it be simpler if we did this on a 1-year budget basis, which would reduce the cost, which is not as important, but it would help people focus more on what are we trying to accomplish in the next year and a half, the remainder of this year and the next fiscal year. So then we're looking at those priority projects that we've talked about. Those are the only ones on the table, and then we look at another meeting at year 2 and what that would be. Does that help?
I think we've come a very, very long way for the 2 years. If we go back to 1 year, then it's back to square one again.
But what I'm hearing, though, is that we were doing for 2 years, we've got all these things on the table, but it's potentially too much for people to, in terms of the capacity to do that. So carving it up into smaller chunks, I'm thinking might be helpful. Otherwise, you're going to have to say, okay, well, then we're not doing a certain line item. Okay, we're not going to do temporary art projects as any kind of RFP or any type of project. We're just going to focus on a performing arts RFP of some sort, and just cutting it that way. Otherwise, you can't cut one without the other, the budget or the timing.
Well, I mean, I think I've already given my suggestions, so I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. From what I hear, I don't think there's going to be a compromise on that issue, which is why I said what I said, which is I will support this one way or another, whether I'm happy with it or I'm not, because I think this is what's right for the city, not because Armand says this or that. It's not on me. It's really about what I think is right for the city, and it is to approve something like this so that we can move forward. So I don't want to belabor the issue, and if I think I've made my point, and I don't think I've garnered any support. So then I'm willing.
No,
I understand that, but I don't think it's as I don't think the level of intensity and passion I have for that point is shared at all.
It is.
I would disagree. I completely hear you. I just think we're looking at it differently, and I'm not as concerned about it because I assume that staff is going to take on each bite as they can moving forward through the priorities, and nothing is. And if we get to the point where we're trying to push too much, we'd say, you know what, we're not going to do what we had on the schedule in June of 2014 because we haven't finished this other, and then it's that sort of work in progress. Totally hear you on that.
Okay.
I completely agree, and that's the only reason I proposed cutting into a smaller chunk and just
I
saying
agree
this
on the
out.
issue.
Yeah, we're not married to this schedule. This was just to give you an idea.
And I want to.
And you say it now?
I like that Mrs. Vartanyan rightly said.
I just want to say that it's not that I'd have a distrust in staff. It's just how much time
Possibility, sure.
you work from this time to that time. I know you even do some other stuff, emails at 10 o'clock at night and what have you. But I don't see this as being doable. I just don't, in terms of all of these projects.
Commissioner Gregorian, could you repeat what it wasn't a motion, but what your suggestion was?
My suggestion was, as you know, I really want to keep for the first year below 150,000. And we cut 20,000 from temporary arts project. That's fine with me, because it's just a work in progress, and we will learn while we are doing it whether it was good or bad, or enough or not enough. And since we all agreed that $80,000 seems to be a little too high for GATE program, I suggested 40,000, but we somehow, although we all said that the 80,000 seems to be too high, we kept it at 80,000. So my compromise is for me to be able to support this for these two reasons. First, we still are under 150, and second, because the GATE program is too high, 80,000. My suggestion was to cut the 80,000 budget for the GATE to 60,000. That way, we will be definitely below our 150,000 goal. And although I still think 60,000 is too high for GATE, but I don't want that to be a deal breaker. I would like to vote for this very hard work, for this very good program, for this very good budget, but I cannot if it is kept at 80,000. So my compromise was, let's just, instead of 80,000, let's do it 60,000 over 2 years, and hope that the consultant will deliver at that level.
Thank you.
So when I cut the 80,000 to 60,000 on GATE, when we already discussed that the temporary and permanent art and the city property is 55 instead of 80, and when we agreed that temporary art projects would be 60,000 instead of 80,000, then we are well within our 150,000 goal.
Let me say that, because I don't think, it's my reason I'm here, I don't think we can go from 80,000 a year to 30,000 a year on a project it have the same caliber. But let me say this. I can support that if we combine our Glendale area temporary art exhibit, GATE, with our temporary art projects column. How does that work? Because we don't know how much the GATE is necessarily going to be. It is still a temporary art program, essentially.
I agree with that. 100% I agree with that.
We can, if you'd like, we can increase if you want to increase the amount for the temporary art projects, and then a subset of that would be gate. And if you want, because you don't want that entire budget to go to one program, unless that's what you choose to do, then you can, or is that what, this?
I'm just recategorizing. So our GATE program, looking at it as not a specific program, but looking at it as a potential program within the temporary art project, because we could have 5 programs within that.
Okay.
And so that way, if we combine what Commissioner Gregorian is proposing in terms of budget, add that into our temporary art projects at the reduced 60, we can then determine, once we get RFPs in from people about how, for the GATE program in particular, how much it's actually going to be, rather than trying to guess now how much it's going to be and what we're going to get for it. That way we have more flexibility when we actually approve a consultant down the road for the GATE program.
That is a very good suggestion, Mrs. Chair. My understanding was that this is a multiple grants, the first line item, which is temporary art project. So if we are talking about multiple grants to different organizations, artists, and all that, I would really like to see the level kept. So again, we can combine this, that's fine with me, but again, at the later stages, if I'm still on this dice, I'm not going to agree with anything more than 60,000 or even 50,000 for the GATE program. Because again, my opposition is not this. I sincerely believe, and in my discussions with almost every artist in town, when I've talked to them, they all agreed with me, and I think this, my colleagues on the dice also agree with me, that $80,000 was too high of a number to pay for somebody for this GATE program. And I can see some of the artists in the audience nodding in agreement with me. So the issue is not whether it's good or bad or whatever, but the issue is $80,000 in 1 year for a GATE program was overspent public money.
Okay.
Okay, what I need to clarification on I heard your point loud and clear, Commissioner Gregorian. So are you recommending we increase temporary art projects to 120,000? You said combining. I'm not clear
Right, so we
again.
had 60,000 that we just sort of agreed to, that we were all talking about, and then the 30,000 from. No, sorry, 60,000.
So it was 60
yes,
and then
120,
60,
yes.
so 120,000.
Yes, doing my
Okay.
math.
And, okay, so the commission can consider continuing with the existing contract, or if you choose to open it up for an RFP, you have to make that decision. And if you do make that decision, then I don't really think it's going to be called GATE anymore, because it was something that was created under a previous contract. So I want to make that clear, too.
That's fine. We can call it anything as long as it's proper.
Whatever you want.
So are we in a position to entertain a motion?
But the programming is going to stay, the number of items we have on the list is going to stay the same?
Correct. We combined two, we've combined.
I know, we
but other than
combined,
that,
but
yes.
kind of, basically.
Anyone like to make a motion?
So we are saying below 150,000 and combining these two, which means GATE might get 80 and the temporary might get 40? Is that
Not
what
if
we're
you're
doing?
on the commission.
Oh, I have that kind of a clout, huh? I wish.
I'd
Okay,
say
somebody
let's
kick me
table
out
the
then.
discussion to another time, when
Okay.
it's more appropriate.
Okay, with this, I will make the motion to approve the budget and the work plan with the understanding that we are combining the temporary arts programs, projects with the GATE program. Possibly we will change the GATE name when it comes. And the total for this, instead of 160 that shows on this charter, will be on this chart, will be 120. With that, and with the other changes, I make a motion to approve this.
And I'll second it.
And roll call, please.
Commissioners Derhovanesian,
Yes?
Gregorian,
Yes.
Kavanian,
Yes.
Chairperson Deaver.
Yes. Next item.
Item 6, Commission Staff Comments.
We are running late, but do we have comments from commissioners, staff?
No, I'll make a quick comment.
Commissioner Cavalier?
On March 3rd, I had my senior recital. I know you guys are all anxiously awaiting the results of it, but I am officially a graduate of Chapman University with 2 degrees to my name.
Congratulations.
Great job.
And hopefully the next council member will still appoint you.
That would all depend on if I'm going to return back to
Okay.
this. But this is probably going to be my last meeting, so see. I might come visit for you from the other side. Getting all choked up. But yeah, I had a lot of fun. Thank you for all the good times. Thank you for the friendship. More than being colleagues, I think all of us are friends. So had a blast. It was good. Had a good tenure. Sat in the middle chair for a couple times, and it was fun. So thanks for the good times, good memories, and maybe I'll see you from the other side.
Other comments?
Short time, yes.
I just wanted to make one comment, and that's, of course, Glendale votes on April 2nd, and Arts for LA in combination with Glendale Arts has produced a survey for the candidates, which can be found through the Arts for LA website under campaigns for those that are interested. I think it's worthwhile to take a look at. Any more other comments? Next item, please.
Actually, I just want to make
Sorry.
a comment about the last item you approved. The budget is actually annually $186,000. I know you were all very excited to approve it, so I was doing the math as you were voting, so I wanted to let you know. But you made the motion and you approved, but
Well,
Commissioner?
you are absolutely right. When we did the calculations with the deductions, we did it from 1 year, not second, but I'm comfortable with the motion now. I mean, I don't want to go back and discuss it again. But we made a mistake. I also made some calculation mistakes. I'm sorry.
Commissioners and Chair Deaver, if you want to reconsider it, you can quickly reconsider it with the adjusted amount.
I'm looking to commissioners for, I think we'll leave it as is.
I
unless
think
there's-
I'm comfortable with what we did.
We'll leave it as is.
Yes. Not happy, but comfortable.
Gotcha. I think we're all there.
As long as you can sleep at night.
I'm not comfortable either way.
As long as you can sleep at night.
So next item.
Item 7, written communications.
I just want to make a note that we did get a written communication from Michael Hayden with regard to art installation project for a development project that went through this commission a few years ago, and where staff is in communication with that artist. And that we also received a communication also from Ed Flores, I believe, from Arts for LA with regard to a small working group that's being put together with the school system with regard to the arts and supporting the arts. And so I want to put that to the record. And next item. And we are adjourned.